had quite a lot of deliberation when we were preparing for today's session. First of all, we're rather late in the day, so we were concerned about how we could continue to keep you entertained for the next 40 minutes. We also have a topic entitled The Regional Nuances of the African Continent. What's the performance and pipeline of these markets, and where are the biggest opportunities, and where do the challenges lie? And we looked at the program for today and we thought, well, you've already heard about performance, you've already heard about pipeline, so how do we keep the conversation engaging for you? So we've taken the view of concentrating more on the latter part of the topic that we were given. And so we're going to be concentrating more on the opportunities and the challenges in our session today, contextualizing it in Southern Africa. Now, depending on which reference you use, according to the World Tourism Organization, Southern Africa includes 5 countries: South Africa, Namibia, Lesotho, Botswana, and who have I left out? Swaziland. We have broadened that and borrowed a few countries from SADC. So our conversation is going to be contextualized around 10 SADC members, and that would include Botswana, Malawi, Mauritius, Mozambique, Namibia, Rwanda, Seychelles, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So I think all my panelists are mic'd up. Fabulous. So if our panelists can please join us on the stage. Next to me, I've got Simone Kuhn, who is the Business Development Manager for Africa and the Indian Oceans at the Rezidor Hotel Group. Next to Simone, Sir Richard Hawkins from the Minor Group, and Sir Richard is Regional Director of Hotel Operations. Next to Sir Richard, we've got Geri Wessels, Director of Development Sub-Saharan Africa for Hilton. And at the end, we've got Graham Howard, who is our Director for Hospitality, Gaming and Development at the United Africa Group. I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to introduce their areas of responsibility within their organizations, as well as give you a little bit of insight into their organization before we get started. Simone, would you like to kick off?
Sure, thanks, Michelle. So I have been part of the Carlson Rezidor Hotel Group in business development for 6 years, and officially a developer for the past 2 years. Our business development team comprises of 3 people, and we work out of our offices in Cape Town. From a Carlson Rezidor organization, we entered into Africa in the year 2000 with our first flagship Radisson Blue Hotel at the waterfront. 17 years later, we have 80 hotels with 17,200 rooms in 29 out of the 54 countries on the continent, and looking to obviously expand into many other areas.
And you're Southern Africa and Indian Ocean Islands.
My territories are to take care of expanding our 4 brands through 10 Anglophone countries, some of which being Botswana, Ethiopia, Zambia, Zim, Swaziland, and Malawi.
Fantastic, thank you. Sir Richard.
Yes, I'm Richard Hawkins. I've been with Minor Hotel Group since December 2014, when Minor Hotel Group bought a clutch of hotels from Sun International at that stage. So we've got 9 hotels in our little portfolio, which is Southern Africa. So we're in Mozambique, where we are in partnership with Rani Resorts. And then we're in Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, with our flagship, the Royal Livingston up there, and Lesotho. So we're busy looking at expanding our current portfolio. Our portfolio is restricted to those countries at the present time, but we're quite keen to expand that and develop some of our Anatara and Avani brands, which we've rebranded those properties right now. So yeah, and I run the operations. That's
you have a dual role because you're also involved with development and operations.
Correct. I'm working with our development team who are resident in Dubai, and together with our investment team, which is resident in Bangkok, we'll look for new opportunities, be it the investments, be it a merger and acquisition, or be it an HMA. So between us, we're a bit of a tag team. So that's kind of how it works.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Geri, so you tasked with Sub-Saharan Africa?
I'm based in Cape Town, so with the Hilton Sub-Saharan Africa development team. I've got a bit of an odd region. So together with my colleague Mike Devereaux, we do Southern Africa. I've also oddly got Rwanda as part of that, Liberia sort of, and Indian Ocean, obviously. So I've been with Hilton since 2013 and responsible for development. So.
Fantastic, thank you. And Graham, met Graham many years ago when I first started doing some work in Namibia. So you're Namibian based with United Africa Group.
Yeah, the United Africa Group, which is a private equity company. I've been with them 13 years. My portfolio is hospitality, gaming and development. We operate in areas of property, renewable energy, services, healthcare and hospitality, being hotels and casinos. We own the Hilton Windhoek. We have a Hilton Garden Inn, which is currently under construction. We have the master franchise agreement for Protea by Marriott. And we own and operate 6 Protea hotels, 6 independent hotels, one of which is in Ethiopia.
So like Sir Richard, you also have a dual development operational...
Development for the hospitality group, yeah.
Fantastic, super. So hopefully that gives you a context for where our conversation will lead this afternoon. So to kick off, when we were looking at what would make a territory attractive and why you would consider going there, we were discussing it among ourselves around the macro and the micro issues. And I think so often we get a situation where we have a developer who has a parcel of land, very excited, they've just come back possibly from a fabulous stay somewhere off the continent, and their aspiration is to develop one of those hotels on their piece of land. And so they go to one of the operations and say, I've got the land, I want your brand on my property. But that might not always be within the hotel operator's strategy. So to the strategy, on the macro issues, what makes a territory get onto your wish list where you would like to have a flag? Simone, would you like to take that one?
Sure. From a Rezidor point of view, I mean, the list is endless, I think, with this. But predominantly, I think we would look at, whether there is a likelihood for economic growth, favorable demographics. Is there a growing urban middle class? Current tourism statistics, is the country actually looking to diversify its economy? The ease of doing business, foreign direct investment, things like that.
Geri, you're also from a hotel operator perspective where you're looking to do management agreements. So from a hotel management agreement perspective, you possibly have less risk than a developer who's franchising or has...
We do. On one side, obviously, reputational risk, which is a big thing. So we wouldn't just look at anything. We do have a strategy which we follow, but on a macro level, we look at population statistics, similar to what Simone said, GDP growth, international, regional transport links, existing supply, future supply, etc. So.
I think
does that change from an operational
you've got to look at the ease of doing business in the country as well. What the tax laws are, what the employment laws are, and Africa is getting quite, they're focusing on their country specifically, much more than they would. So they have been in the past. So, and what I'm saying is that it's employment from within rather than employment from without. And it's easy to when you're starting a hotel, you go and find a waiter, you'll find a waiter locally. It's not necessarily the case when you want to find the general manager or the finance manager, or the chef for that matter. And so when we're looking at a territory, we'll be looking at those aspects on top of how much money you can make out of it, because clearly everybody wants to make money. Okay, so you want to make money for the owner, or if in our case we are either 100% owners or we joint venture partners. We want to make money for everybody. But at the same time, if you haven't got the right skill set, it's really difficult to drive that business like you would do in, say, the UAE, where the world is your oyster in terms of skill. So, Africa, we've got to be very focused on developing and promoting from within in order to be able to achieve the gain. But that's not necessarily always available. The pool, down in South, and I'm sure my colleagues here can attest, the skills pool, even in South Africa, isn't that big.
Yes.
Yeah.
Graham, I mean, the majority of your portfolio is in Namibia, so you understand the dynamics of operating in Namibia, but then you have a property in Ethiopia.
Yes.
So I happen to know your company founder has links with Ethiopia, and that possibly made that transition a little bit easier. But when you decided to go to Ethiopia, what were your main considerations after being essentially a Namibian-centric company?
Yeah, I wanted to say very quickly, stable economy is always a thing that you have to look at. And one of the things we have in Namibia is that because we're linked so closely to South Africa and to the South African rand, we've always said if South Africa sneezes, 24 hours later we have a cold. So we're very dependent on what happens in South Africa for our trading in Namibia. But the owner of our organization is an Ethiopian, and he always had this feeling that he wanted to develop a hotel in Ethiopia. And we came across a piece of land and a property on Lake Hawassa, which is about 250 kilometers south of Addis Ababa. And we've decided that we also have the master franchise agreement for Ethiopia. The idea is that we will make it a Protea by Marriott as well in the foreseeable future.
So there was less sort of concern around identifying a territory in your instance because of that link, and therefore an understanding of that territory because you have Ethiopian.
It actually became the first country we looked at outside of Namibia because of the owner's affiliation to Ethiopia. So it was kind of the natural way to go.
Fantastic. So you've identified where on the map you want to go. How do you then draw down into cities, be they primary or secondary cities within those countries? What are the additional city level type considerations that you look at? Geri, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So we're fortunate enough to have a full, very experienced feasibility team based in London, Watford and Dubai. They assist us a lot in the task of identifying whether a location is suitable for a particular brand. We look at real estate in the area, so residential, commercial, what is driving people to that market. So demand drivers, obviously, supply, upcoming supply again. Those are obviously really big considerations for us. And then operationally, dependent on whether we're franchising or managing. If we're managing, it's always helpful to have synergies or economies of scale through clustering with another property. So if we are looking at developing more properties in a market, if we're franchising, we look at local market knowledge and expertise from the operator side before we brand. So
Yes.
Obviously partners are essential. Really good partners are very essential. So.
Yeah, indeed. Selecting the right partner goes a long way.
And that would influence the type of agreement you strike? Management agreement, franchise?
Yeah, we're slightly different. I think Graham and I are we will invest into the property. So we're quite keen to take a stance on it. And that forms part of the mix in terms of working out how much money you're going to make out of it, because you've got asset growth and whatnot to factor into it. But if you're taking a purely management agreement, if you haven't checked out your owner pretty carefully, it tends to come back and bite you.
So when you're considering a city, are you looking at factors that may lead you more towards a particular brand within your portfolio? Or is your strategy really to try and roll out one of each of your brands in a city?
Well, I think it's about developing lots of hotels in the different territories. So we would normally go in with our flagship brand, Radisson Blu, to start, then followed by a Park Inn. In more developed markets, we would look at, for example, a Radisson Red. However, saying developed, I mean it needs to be able to have the technology to keep up with the brand, because it's very crucial to the brand ID. We're also looking to bring in a new brand, in two new brands in 2018. One of them which is more likely to fit in the economic situations, where the cost per key is slightly less than what a Park Inn would cost, but just on the same as what a Park Inn would cost, but just below the ADR of a Radisson, which gives a really good IR.
Fantastic. So, would it be fair to say, though, that what happens or what you're looking at in one territory would not necessarily be the blueprint for a neighbouring territory.
I think opportunity has a lot to do with it as well. If you take Windhoek, for example, we had no five-star hotel. And one of the decisions we made when we looked at operators was to bring a five-star operator to Windhoek. And I know Geri was instrumental in helping us bring Hilton to Namibia. But that was one of the gaps in the market. And still today, we're the only five-star property in the country.
I think that leads us really nicely into opportunities. How do we go about, or how do you go about identifying opportunities? You've done all your macro issues. You've realised you have on your list you want to go there. How do you now find those opportunities and convert them into realities?
From a Rezidor point of view, we're still fortunate enough to be able to receive new business through leads and phone calls, which puts us in a strong position. Over and above that, it would be things like regular contact with companies like yourselves, Michelè, feasibility study companies, making sure that we're out on all the tenders. Also very much having constant communication with our current owners, because not all of them only want to develop one hotel, they're looking on having 2 or 3 more hotels. It would also revolve around, sorry, I've had a blank.
I think to add to that, that's exactly how we would do it. I mean, you attend a conference like this, and you end up talking to people, and you spread the word. And us as a relatively unknown group of brands, it's always nice to go and market yourself and get yourself out there. They're lucky in that, it's a much wider sort of brand, and the brand awareness is completely different to what ours is. But we've also gone about it to say, well, we're targeting specific cities for our Avani brand, and we'll go into those cities and specifically go and seek them out. So you go and seek out the opportunity. So it is a lot of, pounding the pavements and making phone calls and making yourself known, and, working out just exactly where it is that you want to, hoist your flag.
So when you're pounding the pavement, who's the first door you're knocking on when you get into a city?
Well,
is it the development agency?
You're looking at, you are. I mean, you're looking at those kind of the development companies. You talk about the Redefines and those kind of people in the South African context, and you go knock on their doors and say, well, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Where are you going? And there's property development going on all the time. So it's drive around the neighborhood and look to see who's got a big signboard out there and go and do a bit of research on them. And say, okay, well, is it a company that I'm happy to go and do business with, to go and do a development on their piece of land?
In much of Africa, we find a lot of virgin developers. They're first-time developers, high net worth individuals who have the aspiration now to own a hotel. How do you go about finding those folk or do they find you?
From our side, we actually a bit of both. As an example, nurturing relationships with developers, as Sir Richard said, we get a lot of our leads through architects, through QSs, through professional teams, consultants who've done the report and recommended a certain brand. So that is very helpful, and it's obviously important for us to nurture those relationships because a lot of our leads do come from there. As an example, our owners are here for the Bomwe Grand, which we announced in Kigali. That one, I was staying at the Michelè, looking at a first time in the market, was looking at potentially convincing them to convert it to a curio or something. I hadn't been here before, saw a development across the road, popped in, had a snoop around and found out who I could contact. And that was a great success. We're very excited to get on board on that one. And that's just an example. So obviously with being in the market and being seen, you're front of mind. So people know who to call. They can put a face to a name and they'll know when they do decide to develop. And in the same way, it's not relevant yet in Africa. I think it'll become more prevalent. But our True by Hilton brand, which we launched in the States less than a year ago, we've already got 240 franchise and management agreements signed, all with repeat owners. So it's all existing owners of other brands who are now developing our new brand. And we hope that through experience and a streamlined process and a happy relationship with Hilton, that our existing owners will want to develop more with us the same way Graham and UAG did.
So from an owner's point of view, I mean, we normally know going in who we want as the operator. So we'll go and interview 4 or 5 operators, but sitting at the back of our mind, we know already we want Geri or whoever, you know. So we ask the right questions, we try and find and strike up the right relationship. And as Geri was saying, if you have one property already, it's very easy to get into the next one and those that come thereafter.
Thank you.
That's our experience as well. We find that when we get
I think
the
we must
work,
move them off the stage. What do you think?
Shall we sign now?
We go.
They're both stoking each other up. What's going on here?
I think what you're saying is very true. When we have a project developer coming to us wanting to get the feasibility done, they know who they want to have brand that project. Our conundrum is generally whether that brand and that location are a good fit, and then having that difficult conversation. So if you know where you want to go, you've done your due diligence, you've found the opportunity. How do you take that opportunity to the next step? How do we go from opportunity to a realized project? What are the key things that you've learned over the years in doing this that takes the project from aspiration to reality?
I think a very important thing to note is to develop a trustworthy relationship with the owner, a committed owner, right from the beginning, and not just the owner, at all parties involved. Obtaining an owner budget right from the start. Having boots on the ground, so Rezidor is quite flexible in relation to once we do have a new lead, that we're able to get our business development team, the operations and the technical services team on the ground quite quickly. I think negotiating a fair contract for owner and operator so the relationship doesn't get more difficult as time goes on.
The ideal, I think, for an owner is to take that management agreement and actually put it away and never look at it again. But it should be the general manager's Bible. And I think that's kind of how you want to work with the operator.
Also making the process efficient by providing the correct support and recommending a good professional team. So many times a lot of the stumbling blocks and delays come through either inexperience in a market or not budgeting correctly. So I think actually having a correct costing done up front, it might cost you some more money. Obviously doing a market study as well. It's an initial outlay, but it'll reap rewards. So.
Sure,
I
absolutely.
think a mutual expectations exercise with the owner. What do you want from me? What do you expect from me? What do I expect from you? So that when you do go into and there are tough times, when you do go into that, at least each party knows where the other party is coming from. And that can then help you to get out the other side. You might have a rocky ride getting there, but at least both parties understand where they're coming from. So when it comes down to design, when it comes down to space planning, when it comes down to, whether you're going to get a 440 kVA generator or 220, those kinds of things. And there's a big price difference between the two. And the owner says, this is not your money we're spending here. And we say, but these are the reasons why, and understand where you're coming from. And it certainly helps to smooth the passage. It's a marriage. And it's going to be for 25 years. So, you might divorce at the end of the 25 years, but you've got to live between now and then, and it's difficult to get out.
Absolutely. So if we've done it all right, we shouldn't come up with any challenges. But inevitably, there will be a challenge or two that arises. What in your experience, has been the most sort of common challenges that you've needed to overcome and therefore move on and get beyond that point?
I think from a Rezidor point of view, it would be to tackle the financing issues that have been brought up in previous sessions. So a lack of innovative contractual tools, for example, because Rezidor doesn't invest and we only operate. At the moment, we're starting to look at giving, GOP guarantees in more mature markets. So that's an example, I think. I would think also being up against competitors that are coming into the market with conversion brands and franchises is an issue for Rezidor.
Yeah, our side, it's not just looking at the market the way it is today, but seeing the future as well, so a longer-term outlook. Building a good relationship, as we've said, so challenges in terms of differing in opinion on appointment of consultants or professional team. Again, I come back to that. Funding is a challenge, and South Africa is one of the main markets where we have a huge challenge because leases are still so prominent, and owners and developers really need or want a lease. We can make this a lot more bankable also through different structures. For certain things we can do to help through commitment from our side, etc. And also to introduce, if a lease is the way they want to go, we can introduce a third-party operator who has the expertise, the knowledge, and is well-renowned, and they're willing to take on the lease, and then we'll brand the hotel through a franchise agreement.
Fantastic.
I think some of the challenges which you asked, that happen is and some things you've got to be quite wary of is things like changes in legislation, changes in government, changes in government priorities. Those can have quite a significant impact. We operate casinos as well, and that casino market is developing in Southern Africa. So the consequences are that government will look at it this way this month, and then that way after the by-election or the election that took place in between, and all of a sudden you've got a new Minister of Finance or you've got a new Minister of Tourism or whatever who's got a different objective. And that can be quite tough to, because all of a sudden your cost base changes. You've got unions. How comfortable are you with your union going forward? Because that determines how you manage your property. So those things, they can cause for uncertainty, and then it goes back to your first question, is that if I'm going into a region, I want to look for that certainty, because there's nothing that gives an investor more confidence is that moving into a new territory where you can see that there's certainty in government, you can see it in the sort of social environment, unions and those kinds of things. So that has, for us anyway, that has an impact. And I'm operating in a number of countries, and they're in varying degrees of certainty and uncertainty.
I think that is very, looking at past experience gives us an indicator for what may come in the future. But in today's environment, where we have populist movements, etc., the past is not necessarily the indicator of what's coming,
Agreed.
Which might make it slightly more challenging moving forward. So the landscape is changing far more rapidly than what we possibly have had to deal with in the past.
As we all say, don't be scared if you come to Africa.
So one of our biggest challenges in Namibia was access for many years. You only had Air Namibia, thank goodness, who kept up year after year after year. And in the last 3 months, we've brought in Qatar, Ethiopian, KLM. So I think we're ready for a boom in the country. And looking at the STR reports in a previous presentation today, showed Namibia on the up and up in terms of occupancy. So, I think there's opportunity in the country for even more brands.
Fantastic. Well, I see we've got about 4 minutes left. I'm not sure if anyone from the floor has any questions. You've got a panel of folk willing to share insights. The light is rather bright, but I don't think I'm seeing any hands. No? Late in the day. Yes. All right. So let's wrap up. Hot or not? We started off by saying our conversation was contextualized around 10 countries. So how do we feel about them? Botswana, hot or not?
Hot.
Sir Richard, Botswana, you like, you don't?
No, I like it.
You like?
Oh, yeah. We've got a great
Good
brand
answer.
in there as well, yeah.
Geri?
We have 2 hotels there under development already in Gaborone, so a Hilton and a Hilton Garden Inn. We are definitely looking and find that there's huge potential for lodges and resorts in Botswana. Perhaps not any more in Gaborone for now, I think.
I agree with you.
I think we're well represented, or will be. So definitely lodges and resorts.
Hot.
Hot?
Yeah.
Because I know you've got aspirations to go beyond Namibia.
Hot.
Cool. Malawi.
Definitely hot in Lilongwe and in Blantyre.
Have you got something?
We don't.
Not
no,
yet.
we don't.
Not
No,
yet.
not yet.
I don't have a view on Malawi, to be honest.
It has great potential. There are a lot of issues within the country. It's a very poor country. We signed a Hilton Garden Inn in Lilongwe a couple of months ago, and we'll definitely look at Blantyre. We're fortunate that the owners of our Lilongwe property are operators, and they own one in Blantyre already, which we could potentially convert. So again, resorts and lodges. I mean, it is the most incredible country. I don't think enough people go there. So.
Hot, but not on my radar.
On your watch list?
Could be.
Could be. Mozambique, let's swap around. Graham, how do you feel
Definitely
about Mozambique?
hot. I think it's a fantastic country, great opportunities there. I think one of the biggest things is political stability, but I think it's a good bet.
Anywhere in particular that you like?
I love that whole
Mozambique?
Inhambane, Valankulas area. I think there's great potential there.
Mozambique?
Very hot. We're not there yet. We'd love to be there. Primary market, secondary, tertiary, resorts, lodges.
You'll take the lot.
We'll take the lot.
The lot, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, we well invested in there, so it's a good place to be. And actually, I mean, going to Graham's point, is the political stability has come. Yes, there's been a little bit of fighting in the north, but basically, Renamo and Frelimo have settled their scores. So it's definitely a place, and the financial issues are also seeming to get themselves sorted out. So it's not like Angola, where you've got problems trying to get a hold of money, where Mozambique was like that a year ago. Now it's much better. So really, and beautiful. So,
It is.
Yeah.
You've got amazing islands.
Yeah, we have indeed.
Fabulous islands. Simone, Mozambique.
We have
got a
presence in
property.
Mozambique with,
Yes.
with Radisson Blue and Parkin.
We partners there.
And yes, but definitely room for more development in the secondary and tertiary cities there.
So, Namibia's next on the list. I'm leaving Graham off this because clearly it's hot for him. Simone, feelings on Namibia?
No presence in Namibia yet. Obviously, would look at Windhoek first, and more leaning towards conversion opportunities there.
Richard, you've got a property in
We've got a
Namibia.
property in Windhoek. We're opposite the road from Graham, and it's a great property. It really is a great property.
And it's got a casino with it.
It's got a little casino added.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a unique one. It's on top of a shopping mall.
It's a conversion actually. It used to be an office block. Yeah.
Well, Geri, you've got the
Very
Hilton
hot.
and
We have
a baby
yeah.
It's
Hilton on
very
the
hot.
way.
Very hot
Invested.
relationship.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Hope to expand further with Graham in the future.
Super. South Africa. Simone, you've got a couple of properties there already.
Plenty of opportunity, especially in the secondary markets, places like Nelspruit and Tata. Definite opportunity to grow.
Primary cities not as hot any longer.
Not as hot any longer. No.
Yeah.
No, we've got specific aspirations in the bigger cities. I wouldn't go to the likes of Nelspruit and whatnot. I'll leave that to you and Sogo to deal with that. But yeah, so Sandton or Johannesburg, PW, what you call it, Gauteng, Cape Town, the Western Cape. Yeah. And we'd
The
bring
land
our
prices are quite high.
Pardon?
Where all the land prices are quite
Where all the
high.
land price, yeah, you get that. I mean, I understand. But then you can put an Anatara into the Western Cape on the coastline. Then it's a different proposition. It's a 5-star property. You can really harvest well there. Right now, Cape Town's booming. Occupancies are really good. The rates are okay. Sandton rates I'm a bit disappointed in. But that I think that'll come as time goes by.
Geri, you've got a few properties in South Africa.
We do. We've got 5 trading. We 2 in our pipeline there. We've got a very clear strategy. We've actually identified every location we want to be in and working hard to achieve it, particularly through mid-scale. So Hampton, which we'll bring into South Africa, hopefully with the first signing next year. Hilton Garden Inn, of course. There's a lot of scope for growth under that brand. And then conversion opportunities.
On our radar.
You're ready.
On the radar.
Super. Zambia. Graham, back to you.
Not on my radar. I mean, I love the country, but it's right next door, so it's not on our radar.
Geri, you've got
We've got a Hilton Garden Inn opening there next year in the city centre. We'd definitely look at another complementary property in Lusaka and then again resorts and lodges.
super.
Yeah,
You've got a presence
we
in-
well invested in Zambia, and we would like to see us expanding that presence.
Your investment is in Livingston.
In Livingston, correct. Yeah.
And you'd be
We'd like to
happy
go into Lusaka.
elsewhere in
Yeah.
Lusaka. Yeah, okay.
We have one operational Radisson Blue in Lusaka, looking to bring in a park in quite soon. Also got very keen interest in the Northern Copper Belt, so Kitwe and Dola, Solwezi, and then also south on the Zambezi for a resort.
Fantastic.
Luxury brand.
And then going across the falls into Zimbabwe, not specifically Victoria Falls, but into Zimbabwe. Any interest?
Hotel under development in the capital, and currently looking for opportunities in secondary cities.
Zimbabwe is still hot for you.
Absolutely.
Zimbabwe's hot. I don't think it's hot right now. It will be hot though. I think anybody ignoring Zimbabwe is ignoring it as an error.
So you need to overcome a few of the challenges.
There are some issues, but you know, that's forever. So, but I think Zimbabwe's it's a really good place. They've got great education, they've got great people. You know, the access to money is a little bit challenging, but it's a well-educated workforce. Half of them are living in South Africa, but that's by the way, they can go home.
Yeah, great job, so we can take them all back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the service level there is incredible. So you walk across the border from Zambia and it's a completely different offering. So Vic Falls definitely, and Harare strategically.
Also on our list, yeah.
Super. And then we come to the islands. I'm not sure. I think let's group Mauritius and Reunion for time's sake. Let's group Mauritius and Reunion together and we'll keep Seychelles separately. But let's do the islands together. Graham.
Yeah, I think the islands, everybody wants to be there. I think before we go to the islands, we're going to go elsewhere in Africa, but hot, yeah.
Hot as well.
As well? Sure.
Yeah, we've got an operation there. We've got a development happening right now. So we're really keen to take advantage of Mauritius.
Fantastic.
Same too. Hot.
Good. So we've run out of time. We've got the opportunity to share one parting piece of information with everybody. What would it be?
I would advise the owner to not build on ego, but rather return.
So Richard,
Yeah,
your parting share.
it's a partnership. So if you go into a hotel, make sure you're in for the long run.
Mine is similar to Simone's, the right product, right location, right partner with the same goals.
I think from a Namibian point of view, so few people knew of us, thanks to Donald Trump. We're now in Nambia, and we're the largest exporter of Comfefe. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Please join me in thanking our panel for sharing their insights so generously with us this afternoon. Thank you.